A wealthy CEO takes random black maid to his ex-fiancée's wedding. What she did shocked everyone. Heat crept up his neck. Of course she knew. Everyone knew about his company, his failed engagement, his spectacular fall from grace. What would you do if a stranger saw your pain and didn't try to fix it, but simply acknowledged it? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She walked into that Charleston ballroom like she owned the place. A black woman in a simple navy dress, her arm linked with the most powerful tech CEO on the East Coast. The entire wedding party went silent. Madison Keller, radiant in her $10,000 gown, nearly dropped her champagne flute when she saw them together. But 3 days earlier, Janelle Washington was just trying to survive another double shift at the Baltimore Marriott, her nursing textbooks hidden behind towels in her housekeeping cart. She had no idea that cleaning room 2047 would change her life forever. Have you ever felt invisible? Like the world sees right through you while you're working your hardest just to keep your head above water? That's exactly how Janelle felt every single day, until the moment she knocked on that hotel room door and met Brandon Royce. Brandon wasn't supposed to be there. The 38-year-old CEO had built his AI company from nothing, turning algorithms into millions, but success couldn't fill the emptiness eating at his chest. 6 months after his engagement exploded in scandal, he was hiding in Baltimore, running from reporters and his own reflection. The knock came at 2 p.m. sharp. Housekeeping called a voice that didn't sound rehearsed like the others. When Brandon opened the door, he found himself staring at a woman who looked exhausted but unbroken. Dark eyes that held stories, shoulders squared despite the weight she carried. "Sorry, I can't come back," Janelle said, noting his disheveled appearance. But something in his face made her pause. She'd seen that look before, the hollow stare of someone drowning in plain sight. "No, it's fine. Come in." Brandon stepped aside, watching as she moved through his suite with practiced efficiency. Her movements were quick but careful, respectful of his space, even though he was clearly a mess. "You okay?" she asked suddenly, folding towels with hospital corner precision. The question caught him off guard. Hotel staff never asked personal questions. They pretended not to see the empty bottles, the scattered papers, the obvious signs of a man falling apart. Not really, he admitted before he could stop himself. Janelle paused, studying his face. "Whatever she did to you, she wasn't worth it." The words hit him like a physical blow. How could this stranger see what his therapist, his business partners, his family couldn't? How do you know it was a she? Man like you doesn't hide in hotel rooms unless a woman broke something inside him that money can't fix. She resumed her work, but her tone softened. "I've been there. Different circumstances, same hollow feeling." For the next hour, while Janelle cleaned around him, they talked. Really talked. She told him about her son Marcus, 8 years old, who asked why daddy left but never got answers. About her nursing program that she attended after 16-hour workdays. About dreams deferred but never abandoned. Brandon found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. How Madison's betrayal wasn't just personal, but professional. How she'd fed inside information to competitors. How their entire relationship had been built on lies he was too successful to see. "You know what your problem is?" Janelle said, replacing pillows with military precision. "You're angry at yourself for being human, for believing someone loved you when they only loved what you could do for them." The truth of it stole his breath. When she finished cleaning, Janelle headed for the door, but Brandon's voice stopped her. "What's your name?" "Janelle. Janelle Washington." "I'm Brandon." She smiled, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. "I know who you are, Mr. Royce. Your picture's been in every business magazine for 2 years." Heat crept up his neck. Of course she knew. Everyone knew about his company, his failed engagement, his spectacular fall from grace. "But you talk to me anyway," he said quietly. "Money doesn't make pain hurt less," she replied. "Rich or poor, heartbreak feels the same." As the door closed behind her, Brandon stared at the space she'd occupied, feeling something shift inside his chest. Not healing, but the possibility of it. He had no idea that in 2 days, He'd be asking this remarkable woman to help him face his demons. And she had no idea that saying yes would expose secrets that would shake Charleston's elite to their core. What would you do if a stranger saw your pain and didn't try to fix it, but simply acknowledged it? Drop a comment below and tell me about a time someone surprised you with their honesty. The wedding invitation sat on his nightstand, Madison's elegant script mocking him with its perfection. But for the first time in months, Brandon wasn't thinking about burning it. He was thinking about something else entirely, something that would turn his ex-fiancée's perfect day into the most talked-about scandal of the year. The next morning, Brandon found himself lingering in the hotel lobby, laptop open but forgotten, watching the staff move through their routines. He was looking for her and hating himself for it. When Janelle appeared, pushing a cart toward the elevators, their eyes met across the marble expanse. She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised to see him downstairs instead of holed up in his suite. "Stalking the help now?" she asked, but there was amusement in her voice, not accusation. "Waiting for coffee," he lied smoothly. "The room service here is terrible." She laughed, a real sound that cut through the lobby's pretentious quiet. "The coffee shop's across the street. Better beans, half the price." "Show me." The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. A CEO asking a hotel maid to coffee wasn't just crossing social lines, it was obliterating them. Have you ever met someone who made you forget about everything else? Someone whose presence felt like coming home to a place you'd never been? Share in the comments about that person who changed your perspective on everything. 20 minutes later, they sat in a cramped cafe that smelled like roasted beans and honest work. Janelle had changed out of her uniform into jeans and a Georgetown University sweatshirt that had seen better days. "Georgetown?" Brandon asked, nodding at her shirt. "Community college, actually, but Marcus found this at Goodwill and said it looked smart on me." Her smile faltered slightly. "He thinks education is magic. Like if mommy studies hard enough, everything will get better. Maybe he's right. Maybe." She stirred sugar into her coffee, movements deliberate. "What about you? Where'd you go to become a tech billionaire?" "Stanford, then MIT for my master's." He paused, realizing how pretentious that sounded. "But I learned more about business in my first year of failure than 4 years of school." "Failure's the best teacher," she agreed. "I've got a PhD in it." They talked for 2 hours, about dreams and disappointments, about the weight of expectations and the fear of never being enough. Brandon learned that Janelle's ex-husband had left when Marcus was 2, taking their savings and her trust in men. She learned that Brandon's success had cost him every meaningful relationship in his life. "Can I ask you something?" Janelle said as they prepared to leave. "Why me? Yesterday, I mean. You could have told housekeeping you were fine, closed the door, been left alone. Why did you let me stay and talk?" Brandon considered the question, watching sunlight filter through the cafe windows. "Because you looked at me like I was human, not a headline or a bank account or a business opportunity. Just human." The intensity in his voice made her chest tighten. When was the last time someone had seen her that way? Not as a maid or a single mother or a struggling student, but simply as Janelle. "That's dangerous thinking, Mr. Royce," she said softly. "Brandon, and maybe I'm tired of safe thinking." The air between them crackled with something neither had expected. Attraction, yes, but deeper recognition. Two people who'd been performing for the world, finally meeting someone who didn't need a show. Back at the hotel, they stood awkwardly by the elevators. The spell of the cafe was breaking, reality creeping back in. He was Brandon Royce, CEO worth hundreds of millions. She was Janelle Washington, cleaning lady working 2 jobs to survive. "I should get back to work," she said. "Of course." But he didn't move away. "Janelle, yeah. Would you like to have dinner tonight? Somewhere that doesn't serve coffee in paper cups." The question terrified them both. A wealthy white CEO asking a black hotel maid to dinner wasn't just unusual. It was the kind of story that ended careers and broke hearts. But as Janelle looked into his eyes, she saw something that made her next words inevitable. "Pick me up at 7. What neither of them knew was that across town, Madison Keller was putting finishing touches on wedding invitations that would soon change everything. And one of those invitations was about to land in Brandon's hands like a match to gasoline. Brandon stood outside Janelle's apartment building at 6:55 p.m., questioning every decision that had led him here. The Prince George's County neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but it was worlds away from his penthouse lifestyle. Chain-link fences instead of manicured lawns, corner stores instead of boutiques. He'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt, trying to strike a balance between respectful and overdressed. The last thing he wanted was to show up looking like he was slumming it for entertainment. When Janelle emerged from the building, his breath caught. She'd traded her uniform for a black dress that hugged her curves without being obvious about it, her hair free from its workday ponytail to frame her face in soft waves. She was stunning, but more than that, she looked confident, like she belonged anywhere she chose to be. "You clean up nice," she said, sliding into his Tesla with practiced ease. If the luxury car intimidated her, she didn't show it. "So do you?" He meant it. "Where would you like to go?" "Surprise-moi." But somewhere we can actually talk, not just see and be seen. Have you ever been on a first date where you forgot it was a first date? Where conversation flowed like you'd known each other for years? Tell us in the comments about your most unexpected connection. Brandon drove them to a small Italian place in Georgetown, family-owned and unpretentious. The kind of restaurant where the owner's mother still made pasta by hand and the wine list was written on chalkboard. "This is perfect," Janelle said as they settled into a corner booth. "How did you find this place?" "I used to come here in college when I couldn't afford anywhere else. Haven't been back in years." He looked around, remembering younger, hungrier days. Funny how success can make you forget the places that fed you when you were nobody. "You're still nobody," she said matter-of-factly. "Rich nobody, but nobody all the same. We all are." Her directness should have offended him. Instead, it felt like relief. No one had talked to him like that in years, without calculation, without agenda, just truth served straight. Over dinner, their conversation deepened. Janelle talked about her dreams of becoming a nurse, how she wanted to specialize in pediatric care because kids deserved advocates who understood struggle. Brandon shared his vision for AI technology that could democratize healthcare, make treatments accessible to communities like hers. "That's beautiful," she said when he finished explaining his latest project. Madison didn't support that. The question hit unexpectedly. He'd been so caught up in Janelle's presence that he'd almost forgotten why he was in Baltimore, running from his old life. Madison thought philanthropy was good PR. She never understood that some things matter more than profit margins. "What happened between you two? I mean, if you want to talk about it." Brandon set down his wine glass, studying Janelle's face. In her eyes, he saw genuine curiosity, not the hungry gossip he'd grown accustomed to from others. "She was selling company secrets to our competitors for months, using our relationship, our engagement, as cover while she fed them inside information about our government contracts." The words came out flat, factual. "I found out 3 weeks before our wedding." Janelle's hand found his across the table, her touch gentle but grounding. "I'm sorry. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing I'd been so desperate to have someone love me that I ignored every red flag." She never asked about my work because she cared. She asked because someone was paying her to. "That's not love," Janelle said firmly. "That's business. And you deserve better than being someone's side hustle." Her words, simple and direct, hit him harder than months of therapy had. This woman, who barely knew him, saw his worth more clearly than he did. The evening ended with them sitting in his car outside her building, neither wanting to break the spell. The chemistry between them was undeniable, but so was the complexity of their situation. "Thank you," Brandon said finally, "for tonight, for yesterday, for treating me like a person instead of a walking scandal. Thank you for seeing me as more than just a help." Their first kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. But the answer it received was electric, promising things neither was ready to name. As Janelle walked to her building, Brandon's phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. Madison's wedding invitation, delivered by courier, elegant script announcing her marriage to Senator Keller's chief of staff in 10 days. Looking up at Janelle's window, where a light had just turned on, Brandon made a decision that would shock Charleston society and expose secrets that would destroy lives. But first, he had to ask a hotel MAID to attend the wedding of the year. And somehow, he knew she'd say yes. The next morning brought reality crashing back. Brandon woke to 17 missed calls from his publicist, 6 from his business partner, and a text from his mother that simply read, "We need to talk." The gossip blogs had found him. Somehow, a photo from their dinner had surfaced. Brandon Royce, tech billionaire, holding hands across a table with an unidentified woman. The headlines were brutal, from senator's daughter to mystery woman. Has Brandon Royce lost his mind? He should have felt angry. Instead, all he could think about was protecting Janelle from the storm that was about to hit. At the hotel, he found her in the housekeeping supply room, restocking her cart with the methodical precision he'd come to admire. She looked up when he entered, and he saw in her eyes that she'd already seen the stories. "Regrets?" she asked simply. "None. You." She studied his face, searching for lies or pity or the condescension she'd learned to expect from wealthy men. Finding neither, she smiled. "Marcus saw your picture on my phone this morning. Asked if you were my boyfriend. What did you tell him? That you were someone special who treated his mama with respect." Her voice softened. "He said any man who makes me smile like that must be good people." Brandon felt something crack open in his chest. "I'd like to meet him." The words surprised them both. Brandon had never expressed interest in meeting anyone's children, had actively avoided it, actually. But something about Janelle's fierce love for her son made him want to be part of that circle of trust. Do you believe in moments that change everything? When you know, without doubt, that your life just shifted direction? Drop a heart emoji if you felt that instant when everything clicked into place. That afternoon, Janelle took him to Marcus's school pickup. Brandon watched from his car as she hugged her son. 8 years old, all energy and curiosity, wearing a backpack bigger than his torso. When she pointed toward the Tesla, Marcus's eyes went wide. "Mama, is that really his car?" "And if you're very polite, maybe he'll show you how the doors work." The next hour was a revelation. Marcus, uninhibited by adult social barriers, peppered Brandon with questions about everything from electric engines to video games to why rich people lived in tall buildings instead of houses with yards. "My mama's the smartest person I know," Marcus announced as they walked through a nearby park. "She's going to be a nurse and help sick kids feel better. She told me," Brandon said. "That's pretty amazing. Are you going to marry my mama?" The question, innocent and direct, stopped both adults in their tracks. Janelle started to redirect, but Brandon knelt to Marcus's eye level. "Your mama is incredible," he said seriously. "And right now, we're getting to know each other. Is that okay with you?" Marcus considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "You make her happy. She laughs more now. So yeah, it's okay." That evening, after Marcus was asleep, Brandon and Janelle sat on her apartment building's roof, the Washington Monument glowing in the distance. The photo scandal felt like someone else's problem up here, surrounded by clotheslines and the honest sounds of working families settling in for the night. "This is crazy," Janelle said, but she wasn't pulling away from where their shoulders touched. "The craziest thing I've ever done," Brandon agreed. "Also the most right." She turned to face him, something shifting in her expression. "Brandon, there's something I need to tell you about Madison's wedding." His blood chilled. "What about it?" "I know you got the invitation. Saw it on your nightstand yesterday." She took a breath. "I also know you're thinking about going. About proving something to her, to them, to yourself." "How could you possibly?" "Because I've been there. When my ex left, when people looked at me like I was used goods, like I'd failed at the only job that mattered, keeping a man happy." Her voice grew stronger. "The urge to show up somewhere and prove you're not broken, that you've moved on, that you're better than they thought. I understand that urge." Brandon stared at her, amazed again by her ability to see straight through to his core. "If you go," she continued, "don't go to prove anything to Madison. Go because you want to close that chapter for yourself. And if you need someone to stand beside you while you do it." She didn't finish the sentence, but the offer hung between them like a bridge over dangerous water. "Janelle, You don't understand what you'd be walking into. The people there, the scrutiny, the way they'll look at you. Like I'm not good enough. She laughed, but there was steel in it. Baby, I've been dealing with that my whole life. Question is, can you handle being seen with someone they think isn't good enough for you? Looking into her eyes, Brandon realized she wasn't the one who needed protecting. She was offering to protect him from his own demons, from the judgment of people whose opinions had wounded him for too long. Are you asking me to take you to Madison's wedding? I'm asking if you're brave enough to walk into that room with a woman who sees your worth, instead of hiding from people who never did. The proposal was insane. It would cause a media firestorm, destroy reputations, and expose them both to scrutiny that could break lesser people. It was also exactly what he needed to finally move forward. Janelle Washington, he said, pulling her closer, would you be my date to the wedding from hell? Her answer was a kiss that tasted like courage and felt like coming home. Neither of them knew that Madison's wedding would become the most talked about event of the year. Not for the ceremony, but for what would happen when Janelle Washington decided to speak her truth to a room full of people who needed to hear it. The boutique on Rodeo Drive fell silent when they walked in together. Brandon had insisted on buying Janelle a dress for the wedding, and despite her initial protests about charity, she'd agreed when he framed it differently. Let me give you armor for battle. Now, watching sales associates whisper behind displays of $1,000 gowns, Janelle understood what he meant. This wasn't about money, it was about respect, about walking into a room where everyone expected her to shrink and instead demanding they see her as an equal. Can I help you? The question came from a blonde woman whose smile didn't reach her eyes. Her gaze lingered on Janelle with barely concealed disdain. We're looking for something elegant for a wedding, Brandon said smoothly. Something that makes a statement. What kind of statement are you hoping to make today? Are you standing up for yourself or someone you love? Tell us in the comments about a time you had to find your courage in an impossible situation. For the next hour, Janelle tried on dresses that cost more than her monthly rent. Each one transformed her. Midnight blue silk that made her skin glow, emerald green that brought out her eyes, classic black that screamed sophistication. But it was the navy dress that stopped them both cold. Simple, elegant, with clean lines that emphasized her natural grace. She looked like royalty, not inherited royalty, but earned royalty. The kind that came from surviving life's worst and still choosing kindness. That's the one, Brandon said, his voice rough with something between admiration and desire. In the boutique's fitting room, away from judging eyes, the tension that had been building between them finally found release. Brandon's hands on her zipper, Janelle's fingers tracing the line of his jaw. They were crossing lines neither had planned to cross, but neither could resist. We shouldn't, she whispered, even as she pulled him closer. Probably not, he agreed, his mouth finding the curve of her neck. But I can't seem to care about should when it comes to you. Their kiss was desperate, hungry, weeks of careful distance finally abandoned. In that small space, surrounded by expensive fabric and possibility, they gave in to what had been inevitable since that first conversation in his hotel room. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Janelle smoothed her dress and met Brandon's eyes in the mirror. This changes things, she said. Everything's already changed. This just makes it honest. The drive back to Maryland was charged with new intimacy. They talked about the wedding, about logistics and expectations, but underneath every practical conversation was the awareness of what had shifted between them. They were no longer just two people helping each other heal. They were partners, allies, something approaching lovers. Are you nervous? Brandon asked as they pulled up to her building. Terrified, she admitted, but not of them. I'm scared of what happens after. When the cameras stop flashing and the story gets old, and you remember that I'm just a maid from Maryland with a kid and student loans. Brandon parked and turned to face her fully. Janelle, look at me. She did, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. I've spent 2 years with people who only saw dollar signs when they looked at me. You see me arguing with an 8-year-old about homework and think I'm worth knowing. You think I'm the one who might get tired of you. The vulnerability in his voice undid her. This powerful man, this CEO who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals, was scared she might not want him without the performance. "We're both idiots," she said finally. "Completely," he agreed, and kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. As they made plans for Charleston, flights, hotels, the careful choreography of arriving together. Neither mentioned the growing media attention or the fact that Brandon's phone had been ringing non-stop with calls from reporters, business associates, and his increasingly frantic publicist. They were too busy falling for each other to notice the storm gathering around them. But storms have a way of making themselves known. And this one was about to hit Charleston with enough force to change everything. The wedding was in 3 days. Madison Keller had no idea that her carefully planned society event was about to become ground zero for a confrontation that would expose secrets, challenge assumptions, and prove that sometimes the most unexpected person in a room is the one with the most power. Janelle Washington was about to show Charleston society what happens when you underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Ritz-Carlton Charleston rose before them like a monument to old money and older secrets. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed to open car doors as Charleston's elite arrived for the wedding of the season. Madison Keller to Thomas Whitmore, the senator's right-hand man and heir to a shipping fortune. Brandon felt Janelle's hand tighten in his as they stepped out of the car. She looked magnificent in the navy dress, her natural confidence amplified by the knowledge that she belonged anywhere she chose to be. But he could feel the tension radiating from her body as camera flashes exploded around them. Mr. Royce, who's your date? Can you comment on your relationship?" The questions came rapid fire from reporters who'd caught wind of the story. Brandon placed his hand on the small of Janelle's back, not to guide her, but to ground himself. She was his anchor in this storm. "Breathe," she whispered as they walked through the gauntlet. "They're just people with fancy clothes and loud opinions." The ballroom took Janelle's breath away despite her determination not to be impressed. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors, and flower arrangements that cost more than her car payment adorned every surface. This wasn't just wealth. This was power, tradition, the kind of money that bought senators and silent scandals. Have you ever walked into a room where you knew you didn't belong, but you belonged to someone who did? Share in the comments about a time you had a fake confidence until you found your real strength. Well, look what the cat dragged in. The voice belonged to Patricia Whitmore, the groom's mother, whose smile could freeze blood. She approached with 3 other women in tow, Charleston society's inner circle, each one a master of the art of polite destruction. "Patricia," Brandon said evenly. "Beautiful ceremony." Indeed, her gaze fixed on Janelle with surgical precision. "And who might this be? I don't believe we've been introduced." Here it was, the first test. Janelle stepped forward with a smile that matched Patricia's for warmth and exceeded it for sincerity. "Janelle Washington, thank you so much for having me. Your son's wedding is absolutely beautiful." "Washington," Patricia repeated, as if tasting something unpleasant. "Are you local?" The question dripped with subtext. Local meant old Charleston family. Local meant acceptable. Local meant white. "Maryland, actually, Prince George's County." Janelle's voice remained steady, but Brandon caught the slight lift of her chin, a fighter's stance. "How interesting. And how exactly do you know Brandon?" Before Janelle could answer, a familiar voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Hello, Brandon." Madison Keller, now Madison Whitmore, appeared in a cloud of silk and satisfaction. She looked perfect as always. Blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo, diamonds at her throat that caught the light with every breath, skin that had never known a day of honest work. But when her eyes landed on Janelle, something flickered across her face. Surprise, certainly, but underneath, Brandon caught something else, fear. "Madison, congratulations." Brandon's voice was steady, but Janelle felt the tension in his body. "Thank you." Madison's gaze swept over Janelle with obvious calculation. "And this is Janelle Washington," Janelle said before Brandon could introduce her. She extended her hand with quiet confidence. "Congratulations on your wedding." "You look beautiful." Madison shook her hand briefly, as if contact might be contagious. "Thank you. And you're here with Brandon because—" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, conversations had quieted. People were watching, waiting, phones discreetly recording what was clearly becoming the evening's entertainment. Janelle smiled wider. "Because he asked me to be here. Because I said yes. Because sometimes the most important person in the room is the one nobody expects." The words landed like a gauntlet thrown down. Madison's perfect composure cracked slightly, revealing something sharp underneath. "How refreshing. I'm sure you'll find the evening educational." "Oh, I already am," Janelle replied sweetly. "It's fascinating to see how people react when their assumptions get challenged." Brandon watched the exchange with growing admiration. Janelle wasn't just holding her own. She was setting the tone, taking control of a conversation designed to diminish her. "Well," Patricia Whitmore interjected, clearly sensing the need to redirect. "Dinner will be served shortly. I'm sure you'll find your table interesting." As the women moved away, their whispers following like smoke, Janelle turned to Brandon with a look that made his heart race. "That went better than expected," she said. "Better? They just declared war on you." "Baby," she said, stepping closer so her voice wouldn't carry. "They started a war the moment they decided I didn't deserve to be here. The question is, are you ready to finish it?" Before he could answer, she kissed him, right there in the middle of Charleston's most exclusive ballroom, in front of phones and cameras and 300 of the South's most influential people. It wasn't a soft, appropriate peck. It was a statement, a declaration that she wasn't just Brandon's date. She was his choice. When they broke apart, the ballroom had gone completely silent. "Now," Janelle said, smoothing her dress and taking his arm, "let's go find our table. I have a feeling this dinner is about to get very interesting." What she didn't tell him was that she'd recognized something in Madison's eyes during their introduction. Not just fear or guilt, the kind of guilt that came with secrets. And before this night was over, Janelle Washington was going to find out exactly what Madison Whitmore was hiding. The dinner seating was clearly strategic warfare disguised as etiquette. Brandon and Janelle found themselves at table 12, far from the head table, but close enough to be visible, surrounded by Charleston's version of a jury. Old money families who'd perfected the art of judgment over generations. "Table 12, murmured the woman to Janelle's left, a rail-thin blonde whose jewelry probably cost more than most people's houses. How democratic." Janelle smiled politely and said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people revealed more than they intended. "So, Janelle," said the man across from her, someone's third husband who'd married up twice, "what do you do?" The question everyone had been dying to ask. Around the table, conversations paused as ears strained to hear her answer. "I'm in healthcare," she said simply, taking a sip of wine that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Have you ever been in a situation where every word was being judged, where people were waiting for you to fail? Tell us in the comments how you handled being underestimated. "Healthcare," repeated the woman to her right, whose southern accent could cut glass. "How wonderful." "Administration?" "Patient care." The follow-up questions came rapid fire, each one designed to extract the full truth. Where did she work? What exactly did she do? How did she afford that dress? But Janelle deflected with the skill of someone who'd spent years protecting herself from invasive questions. Meanwhile, Brandon watched the performance with growing anger. These people, his people, supposedly, were dissecting Janelle like a specimen, trying to find the flaw that would justify their dismissal of her. "She's handling them beautifully," said a voice beside him. He turned to find James Morrison, an old college friend whose family owned half of Savannah's shipping industry. "She shouldn't have to handle anything," Brandon replied tightly. "No, but she is, and better than most." James studied Janelle with genuine admiration. "You know what's driving them crazy? She's not apologizing for being here. Most people would be either defensive or trying too hard to fit in. She's just present." Across the ballroom, Madison held court at the head table, but Brandon noticed her gaze kept drifting toward table 12. toward Janelle. There was something almost frantic in her attention, like she was waiting for something to happen. The speeches began after the main course. The usual wedding fare, childhood stories, gentle roasting, wishes for happiness. But when Madison's father took the microphone, the tone shifted. "My daughter has always known her worth," Senator Keller declared, his voice carrying the authority of decades in politics. "She's never settled for less than she deserved, never compromised her standards for temporary comfort." The words were clearly aimed at their table, at Brandon specifically. Around table 12, smiles grew sharper as the message landed. "Some people," the senator continued, "understand the difference between true compatibility and temporary fascination. Madison has always been wise enough to choose substance over novelty." The insult was delivered with surgical precision, wrapped in enough plausible deniability that calling it out would seem petty. But Janelle felt Brandon's hand tighten on hers under the table. "Easy," she whispered. "He's just a man with a microphone and an opinion. Neither of those things change who we are." But something in Madison's expression as her father spoke caught Janelle's attention. The bride looked pale, almost sick, her smile frozen in place. When Senator Keller raised his glass in a toast to knowing the difference between what glitters and what's gold, Madison's hand shook slightly as she lifted her champagne. Interesting, Janelle thought. Very interesting. The evening continued with dancing and more barely concealed hostility. But as the night wore on, Janelle noticed a pattern. Whenever conversations turned to Brandon's company, to the government contracts he'd lost, to the unfortunate circumstances of his broken engagement, Madison appeared nearby, listening, watching, monitoring. "She's nervous about something," Janelle murmured to Brandon during a slow dance that had half the room staring. Madison's always nervous at public events. Not social anxiety nervous, guilty nervous, secret-keeping nervous. Janelle's voice was thoughtful. "Question is, what's she hiding that she thinks I might figure out?" Brandon spun her gently, using the movement to scan the room. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking your ex-fiancée has been watching us all night like we're a bomb about to go off. And I'm wondering why she's so worried about what a hotel maid from Maryland might say or do." The song ended, but they remained close, awareness crackling between them despite the hostile environment. "Janelle," Brandon said quietly, "whatever you're planning." "Who says I'm planning anything?" she replied innocently. "I'm just here to support my man at his ex's wedding. Though if someone happens to ask me the right question." She didn't finish the sentence, but her smile promised that the evening was far from over. And somewhere across the ballroom, Madison Whitmore felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The confrontation came during the bouquet toss, when alcohol had loosened tongues and the veneer of Southern politeness had worn thin. Janelle was returning from the bathroom when she found her path blocked by 3 women who'd clearly been waiting for her. "Having fun, honey?" The leader was Caroline Ashford, whose family had owned Charleston real estate since before the Civil War. Her smile was all teeth and venom. "Wonderful time, thank you." Janelle's voice remained steady, but every instinct told her to prepare for battle. "I'm sure you are. Must be quite the fairy tale. Cinderella at the ball." Caroline's friends giggled appreciatively. "Though I suppose in this version, Cinderella works housekeeping at the hotel where Prince Charming is drowning his sorrows." The words hit their target, but Janelle didn't flinch. "Is there something you wanted to say to me, Caroline?" "Just curious about your story, sweetheart. You appear out of nowhere with one of Charleston's most eligible bachelors, and nobody knows anything about you. It's unusual. Have you ever had someone try to make you feel small because they were threatened by your presence? Drop a comment about how you stood up for yourself when it mattered most. What would you like to know?" The direct question caught Caroline off guard. She'd expected defensiveness, embarrassment, maybe even tears. Not this calm invitation to judgment. "Well, for starters, how exactly did the hotel MAID land a man like Brandon Royce?" The question was designed to humiliate, to reduce Janelle to a gold-digging stereotype. Around them, other conversations had quieted as people sensed drama brewing. By treating him like a human being instead of a bank account, Janelle replied evenly. By listening when he talked instead of calculating what his words could do for me. By seeing his heart instead of his portfolio. Caroline's face flushed. How noble. And I suppose it has nothing to do with his money. Honey, Janelle said, her voice dropping to a conversational tone that somehow carried to every listening ear. If I wanted money, I could have married my ex-husband's dealer, made better profit margins, less emotional investment. But that's not what this is about. Then what is it about? This from Patricia Whitmore, who'd materialized beside Caroline like backup arriving at a fight. Janelle looked around the circle of expectant faces, seeing not wealth or power, but insecurity masquerading as superiority. These women, for all their privilege, were terrified of being replaced, of losing relevance, of discovering that their worth wasn't as unshakable as their trust funds. It's about love, she said simply. Real love. The kind that sees you at your worst and chooses to stay. The kind that builds you up instead of tearing others down to make itself feel bigger. How precious, Caroline sneered. And what happens when the novelty wears off? When he remembers that charity cases are for tax write-offs, not marriage certificates? The words were designed to shatter confidence, to plant seeds of doubt that would grow into relationship-killing insecurity. But Janelle smiled instead of crumbling. You know what's fascinating about that question, Caroline? It says way more about your relationships than mine. Maybe instead of worrying about my love life, you should ask yourself why you can't imagine a man wanting someone for reasons that have nothing to do with social status. The hit landed hard enough to make Caroline step back, but before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Ladies, is there a problem here? Madison appeared in her wedding dress like an avenging angel, but Janelle caught something in her expression. Relief? As if she'd been looking for an excuse to interrupt this exact conversation. No problem at all, Janelle said smoothly. Just getting acquainted with some of Brandon's old friends. They've been very educational. Madison's smile was tight. I'm sure they have. Caroline, I believe your husband was looking for you. As the other women reluctantly dispersed, Madison lingered, studying Janelle with obvious calculation. You handled that well, she said finally. Practice. Amazing how many people think hotel maids don't have feelings or backbones. About that, Madison said, her voice dropping to a whisper, I was hoping we could talk. Privately. Janelle raised an eyebrow. What could the bride possibly want to discuss with the help? Madison's composure cracked slightly. Please, 5 minutes. There are things about Brandon, about what happened between us, that you should know before. Before what? Before you get hurt the way I did. The words hung between them, loaded with implications that made Janelle's pulse quicken. Whatever Madison was hiding, whatever secret she'd been protecting all evening, she was finally ready to reveal it. And Janelle had a feeling it was going to change everything. The bride's dressing room felt like a confessional, all white silk and guilty secrets. Madison paced in her wedding gown, while Janelle leaned against the vanity, arms crossed, waiting for the truth that had been dancing around the edges of the evening. You don't know him like I do, Madison began, her voice shaking with something between desperation and warning. You think you see the real Brandon, but there are things, such as he's obsessed with fixing people, saving them. It's not love, it's a complex. Madison's words came faster now, like she'd been rehearsing this speech. He did the same thing with me. Found me when I was vulnerable, swept me off my feet, made me feel special, until he got bored and needed a new project. Janelle studied Madison's face, seeing genuine emotion, but also something else. The desperation of someone whose story wasn't holding water. Is that why you betrayed him? Sold company secrets to his competitors? Because you were bored? The question landed like a physical blow. Madison stopped pacing, color draining from her face. How did you? He told me. Unlike you, he doesn't keep secrets from people he cares about. Janelle pushed off from the vanity, moving closer. But that's not the whole story, is it, Madison? There's something else. Something you're terrified I might figure out. Have you ever watched someone's whole world shift in real time? When truth finally surfaces after being buried in lies. Share in the comments about a moment when everything you thought you knew changed instantly. Madison's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. You don't understand. The contracts, the information I shared, it wasn't supposed to hurt his company. It was supposed to help. Help how? By making sure the government contracts went to companies that wouldn't misuse them. Brandon's AI technology, his facial recognition software, it was being considered for immigration enforcement, for tracking undocumented families. Madison's voice broke. I couldn't let that happen. Not when I knew what it would do to communities like yours. The revelation hit Janelle like cold water. You were protecting immigrant families by sabotaging your own fiancé. I was protecting everyone, including him. Do you think he could live with himself if his technology was used to separate children from their parents? If his algorithms helped build the databases that destroyed families? For the first time since arriving in Charleston, Janelle felt genuinely off balance. This wasn't the simple betrayal story Brandon had told her. This was something far more complex and far more devastating. Does he know about why you really did it? Madison laughed bitterly. I tried to tell him, but by then, he'd already decided I was just another gold digger who'd used him. He couldn't hear past his own hurt to understand that I was trying to save him from becoming something he'd hate. So you let him think you betrayed him for money? Better that than letting him know his life's work was about to become a weapon against innocent people. Better that than watching him blame himself when families got destroyed because of technology he created to help people. The room fell silent, except for the distant sounds of the reception continuing below. Janelle felt the ground shifting beneath everything she thought she understood about Brandon, about Madison, about the entire situation. Why are you telling me this? Because you love him. I can see it. Madison's voice was barely a whisper. And because he's going to find out eventually. The government contracts, the real reason behind the company changes, it's all going to come out. And when it does what? When it does, he's going to need someone who can help him understand that sometimes love means making impossible choices. Someone who can't forgive him for not seeing the truth when it was right in front of him. The weight of Madison's confession settled between them like a bridge over dangerous water. Everything Janelle thought she knew about the woman in the wedding dress, about the man she was falling for, about the entire mess that had brought them together, all of it had just shifted into something far more complicated. There's more, isn't there? Janelle asked quietly. Madison nodded, tears finally spilling over. The worst part, the part that's going to destroy him when he finds out. Tell me, his business partner, David Chun, the one who's been handling the government contracts, who assured Brandon they were all humanitarian applications? Madison's voice broke completely. He's been lying to Brandon from the beginning. The immigration enforcement deal, the facial recognition for family detention centers, it's all still happening. David just moved it through shell companies so Brandon wouldn't know. The betrayal was devastating in its scope. Brandon wasn't just a man whose fiancée had sold secrets. He was a man whose entire professional life had been built on lies, whose technology was being used for exactly the purposes he would never approve of. And he had no idea. Madison, Janelle said slowly, why are you really telling me this? Tonight at your wedding? The bride met her eyes in the mirror, and for the first time all evening, her expression was completely honest. Because tomorrow morning, the Washington Post is running a story about David's shell companies, about the government contracts, about everything. Madison's voice was barely audible, and when Brandon's world falls apart, he's going to need someone who knows the truth to help him rebuild it. Suddenly, every strange look, every nervous glance, every moment of barely controlled panic from Madison throughout the evening made perfect sense. She hadn't been worried about Janelle causing a scene at her wedding. She'd been trying to prepare the woman she suspected Brandon loved for the moment his entire life would explode. Janelle walked back into the ballroom, carrying secrets that felt heavier than the crystal chandeliers overhead. The reception continued around her. Laughter, dancing, the careful choreography of Charleston society. But everything felt surreal now, like watching a play when you knew the theater was on fire. Brandon found her at the bar, concern creasing his features. You were gone a long time. Everything okay? How do you tell a man you love that his world is about to implode? That the woman he thought betrayed him had actually been trying to save him? That his business partner, his closest friend, had been lying to him for years? "We need to talk," she said quietly. "But not here. Janelle, you're scaring me." Before she could respond, David Chun appeared beside them, all smiles and expensive cologne. Brandon's business partner and best friend since college. The man who'd helped build their company from a Stanford dorm room dream into a multi-million-dollar reality. "There you are." David's voice carried the false cheer of someone who'd had too much champagne. "I've been looking for you all night. And this must be the famous Janelle." He extended his hand with practiced charm, but Janelle saw something else in his eyes. Calculation, assessment, the look of a man trying to figure out how much damage she might cause. "David Chun," he said as they shook hands. "I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have." Janelle's voice was carefully neutral, but her mind was racing. This was the man Madison had described, the one who'd been using Brandon's technology for purposes that would horrify him. Looking at David's smooth smile, she could see how easily he'd manipulated the situation, how perfectly he'd positioned himself as the loyal friend while selling Brandon's soul behind his back. When is the last time you discovered someone you trusted had been lying to you? How did you handle learning that everything you believed was built on deception? Share your story in the comments below. "David was just telling me about the new contracts," Brandon said, oblivious to the tension crackling between his girlfriend and his business partner. Humanitarian applications for the facial recognition software. Schools, hospitals, missing children databases. "Sounds important," Janelle managed, watching David's face carefully. The man didn't even flinch at the lie. If anything, his smile grew warmer. "It is. We're really making a difference, helping people instead of just making money." David's performance was flawless. The committed humanitarian, the ethical businessman, the loyal friend who shared Brandon's values. But Janelle had spent years reading people who lied for survival, and she recognized the signs. The slightly too steady eye contact, the practiced sincerity, the way he touched Brandon's shoulder with manufactured affection. "That must be so rewarding," she said. "Knowing your work is helping families stay together instead of tearing them apart." The words were a test, and David passed it with flying colors, nodding earnestly about the importance of keeping families safe. He was good, better than good. He was a master manipulator who'd convinced his best friend to build tools of oppression while believing he was creating instruments of liberation. "Well," David said after a few more minutes of casual conversation, "I should let you two get back to enjoying the evening. Though I have to say, Brandon, you've certainly surprised everyone tonight." "How so?" "Bringing Janelle. It's bold. Different." David's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I admire people who aren't afraid to shake things up." After he walked away, Brandon turned to Janelle with obvious confusion. "Okay, what was that about? You looked like you wanted to punch him." "Maybe I did." "Why?" "David's been my best friend for 15 years. He's the most ethical person I know." The words were like knives in Janelle's chest. How do you destroy someone's faith in their closest friend? How do you be the bearer of truth that will change everything? "Brandon," she said carefully, "how much do you actually know about those government contracts David mentioned?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, have you seen the actual applications? The end users? The specific ways your technology is being implemented?" Something in her tone made him pause. "David handles all that. He knows I don't want to get bogged down in bureaucratic details." "And you trust him completely?" "Of course I trust him. He's my best friend, my business partner, Brandon stopped, studying her face. "Janelle, what aren't you telling me?" Before she could answer, the bandleader announced the last dance of the evening. Around them, couples moved onto the dance floor for the final waltz, but Janelle felt like the world was spinning too fast to find her footing. "Dance with me," she said suddenly. "One more dance before everything changes." "Before everything changes how?" She took his hand and led him onto the floor, into the swirl of silk and secrets that had defined this entire evening. Tomorrow, the truth would come out. Tomorrow, Brandon would learn that his best friend had betrayed him, that his ex-fiancée had tried to save him, that his life's work had been perverted into something he'd never support. But tonight, For 3 more minutes of waltz, she could hold him close and let him believe the world was still the place he thought it was. "I love you," she whispered against his ear as they moved to the music. "I love you too," he replied, spinning her gently. "Whatever you need to tell me, whatever's wrong, we'll figure out together." The music ended, but they remained close, surrounded by Charleston's elite and unaware that everything they'd built together was about to be tested in ways neither could imagine. Because tomorrow morning, the Washington Post would destroy Brandon's world. And tonight was the last night before everything changed forever. The Washington Post headline screamed across Brandon's phone screen at 6:47 a.m. Tech giant's AI used in family separation operations. Exclusive investigation reveals shell company deception. He sat on the edge of his hotel bed, still in yesterday's tuxedo pants, reading words that made his blood turn to ice. Photos of detention centers, screenshots of contracts, financial records showing money trails he'd never seen before, and David Chin's signature on every document. Janelle watched from across the room as Brandon's face went through stages of disbelief, horror, and finally, devastating understanding. She'd barely slept, knowing this moment was coming, knowing she'd have to watch the man she loved discover that his life's work had been turned into a weapon. "This can't be real," he whispered, scrolling through page after page of evidence. "David wouldn't. We specifically said no military applications, no enforcement uses." "Brandon." Her voice was gentle, but he needed to hear this. "I knew. Last night, Madison told me. She tried to tell you before, but you knew." The words came out sharp, hurt. "You knew about this and didn't tell me? I found out at the wedding. Madison was trying to warn me, to prepare me for when this story broke." Brandon's phone rang, David's name flashing on the screen. He stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Brandon, buddy, I know you've seen the story. Let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me for 2 years. That you turned our technology into a tool for destroying families. Have you ever had to watch someone you love realize their whole life was built on lies? When the person they trusted most became their biggest betrayer." Share in the comments about a time you had to help someone through devastating betrayal. David's voice shifted, became defensive. "It's not that simple. The contracts were legitimate. The applications were approved." "Approved by who?" "Because I never approved using facial recognition to track down scared parents hiding with their children. I never approved helping build databases to hunt families." "Brandon, you're being emotional. The technology itself isn't evil. It's just, don't." Brandon's voice was deadly quiet. "Don't you dare try to spin this. I trusted you. I believed you when you said these contracts were humanitarian. I let you handle the details because I thought you share my values. I do share your values. Sometimes protecting people means making hard choices." Brandon hung up. The silence in the hotel room felt heavy, dangerous. Brandon sat with his head in his hands while the full scope of his betrayal became clear. His best friend had sold his soul while convincing him he was saving the world. "I need to fix this," he said finally. "The contracts, the technology, everything. I have to find a way to stop what David started." "We'll fix it," Janelle corrected, moving to sit beside him. "Together. We?" "Janelle, this is going to destroy my company, my reputation, everything I've built." He looked at her with something like desperation. "You don't have to go down with this ship." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me. You didn't know. You trusted someone who lied to you. That doesn't make you responsible for their choices. But it was my technology, used against your wishes by someone who manipulated you. There's a difference between being naive and being complicit." Brandon's phone buzzed with another call, his lawyer this time, then his publicist, then reporters who'd somehow gotten his number. "They're all going to want statements," he said, watching the calls pile up. "Explanations, apologies, damage control. Then we give him the truth. All of it. About David's lies, about Madison's real reasons for the betrayal, about what you're going to do to fix this mess. And if it ruins everything, the company, my career, any chance of stopping the damage David caused." Janelle was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Charleston, about the women who tried to make her feel small, about the assumptions people made based on appearances. "You know what I learned last night?" she said finally. "The people who judge you hardest are usually the ones most afraid of being judged themselves. And the ones worth keeping in your life, they'll stick around to help you rebuild." Brandon pulled her closer, drawing strength from her certainty. "I don't deserve you. Lucky for you, love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing each other, especially when everything else falls apart." As Charleston woke up to the scandal that would dominate news cycles for weeks, as David Chun prepared his own damage control, as Madison Whitmore read the headlines on her honeymoon and wondered if she'd done the right thing, Brandon and Janelle held each other in a hotel room and planned their counterattack. Because sometimes the biggest scandal isn't the one that destroys you. It's the one that finally sets you free to become who you were meant to be. The real story was just beginning. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Brandon's company headquarters in Baltimore. By noon, the parking lot looked like a media circus. News vans, reporters, protesters holding signs that read both justice for families and support tech innovation. Janelle stood in Brandon's office, watching him pace while his legal team prepped talking points he had no intention of using. "Sir, we really recommend sticking to the prepared statement," his lawyer insisted. "Admit no wrongdoing, express regret about being misled, announce David's immediate termination, and promise a full internal review." "No." Brandon's voice was firm. "I'm telling the truth. All of it. Mr. Royce, the truth could open you up to lawsuits, criminal liability. The truth is the only thing that might help the families whose lives got destroyed by my technology. Everything else is just protecting my ass." His publicist looked ready to faint. "Brandon, your reputation is already shot. But maybe if I'm honest about what happened, I can save what matters more than my reputation." Janelle watched the lawyers exchange worried glances. They didn't understand what she'd figured out about Brandon weeks ago. His integrity mattered more to him than his success. It's what made him worth loving, and what made this betrayal so devastating. When do you choose truth over self-preservation? Have you ever had to risk everything to do what's right? Tell us in the comments about a time you chose courage over comfort. "I'll be right beside you," she told him as they prepared to face the cameras. "Janelle, you don't have to do this. The questions they'll ask, the way they'll treat you, let them ask. Let them treat me however they want. I know who I am, and I know who you are. That's all that matters." The press conference room was packed beyond capacity. Cameras flashed as Brandon took the podium, Janelle standing slightly behind him, visible, supportive, unashamed. "Thank you all for coming," Brandon began, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I'm here to tell you the truth about my company, about the government contracts that have caused so much pain, and about how I was deceived by someone I trusted completely." For the next 20 minutes, he laid it all out. David's lies, the shell companies, the contracts Brandon had never seen. His voice broke when he talked about the families affected by technology he'd created to help people. "I take full responsibility for not asking harder questions, for trusting too completely, for allowing my company to be used in ways that violate everything I believe in," he said. "But I want to be clear about something. This ends now. Every government contract involving facial recognition is terminated as of today. Every dollar of profit from those contracts will go to organizations helping reunite separated families." The questions came like bullets. "Mr. Royce, are you claiming you had no knowledge of your company's largest revenue stream? How do we know this isn't just damage control? What about the shareholders who will lose millions because of your decision?" But it was the final question that changed everything. "Mr. Royce, some people are saying this whole scandal is connected to your relationship with your current girlfriend, that you're making emotional decisions instead of business decisions. How do you respond?" Brandon's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Janelle stepped forward to the microphone. "May I?" The room went silent. This wasn't part of the plan, wasn't what anyone expected. Brandon nodded, stepping aside to let her speak. "My name is Janelle Washington. I'm a nursing student, a single mother, and yes, I'm in love with Brandon Royce." Her voice carried clearly through the packed room. "Yesterday, some of you would have called me a gold digger, a social climber, someone using a rich man for what I could get. Today, I'm standing here watching that same man sacrifice hundreds of millions of dollars because he'd rather be broke and honest than rich and complicit. She paused, letting that sink in. So ask yourselves, if I was only interested in his money, would I still be here? Would I be standing beside him while he gives it all away to help people he's never met? Or would I have run the moment things got complicated? The room erupted in questions, but Janelle was already stepping back, her point made with devastating clarity. As they left the conference together, reporters shouting questions they ignored, Brandon squeezed her hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For showing them who we really are." 3 weeks after the press conference, Brandon's company stock had dropped 40%. David Chun was facing federal charges, and Janelle Washington had become the most talked about woman in America. She was also exhausted. "Mama, why are there people with cameras outside our building?" Marcus asked, peeking through their apartment blinds at the news crews camped below. "Because sometimes when adults make big decisions, other adults want to know about it," Janelle explained, helping him with his homework at their kitchen table. "Is Brandon in trouble?" "Not trouble exactly, but some people don't understand why he did what he did." Marcus considered this with 8-year-old wisdom. He gave away money to help kids like me, right? Kids whose daddies got taken away. The simplicity of it took her breath away. "Yes, baby, that's exactly what he did. Then he's a good person. I don't understand why anyone's mad about that." Neither did she most days. But she was learning that doing the right thing often made people angrier than doing the wrong thing quietly. Have you ever made a choice that cost you something but felt completely right anyway? When did you last choose your values over your comfort? Share your story in the comments below. Brandon arrived that evening looking worn down but determined. The legal battles were taking their toll, but every day brought new developments that proved they'd made the right choice. Families were being reunited. Detention policies were being challenged. His technology was being removed from enforcement applications. "How was your day?" he asked, settling beside Marcus to look at his math homework. "Good. I told my teacher about how you're helping families. She said that's called integrity." Brandon's smile was the first genuine one Janelle had seen from him all week. Over dinner, takeout Chinese food eaten off paper plates because normal life felt like a luxury they couldn't afford right now. They talked about the future. "The company's going to survive," Brandon said. "Smaller, different focus, but it'll survive. My lawyer thinks the worst of the legal stuff will be resolved in 6 months. And then what? Then we rebuild. Smarter this time. More careful about who we trust, what contracts we take, how we make sure our technology helps instead of hurts." Marcus looked up from his lo mein. "Can I help? I'm good at math, and I know which grown-ups are lying." The innocent offer made them both laugh. The first real laughter in their apartment since this whole mess started. "You know what?" Brandon said seriously. "I might take you up on that. You've got better instincts than most adults I know." Later, after Marcus was asleep, Brandon and Janelle sat on her fire escape, looking out over a neighborhood that felt like home in ways his penthouse never had. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Everything you gave up? Everything you lost?" "I regret trusting David. I regret not asking harder questions sooner. I regret that families got hurt because of my technology." He took her hand. "But I don't regret choosing truth over profit. And I definitely don't regret you. Even though I'm the reason you're sitting on a fire escape in Maryland instead of a balcony overlooking the harbor. Especially because of that." He pulled her closer. "Money could buy a lot of things, Janelle, but it can't buy what you've given me, which is a reason to be better than I was. Someone who sees my heart instead of my bank account. A family that accepts me exactly as I am." The word family hung between them, loaded with possibility and promise. "Is that what this is?" she asked softly. "If you'll have us. Marcus and me, I mean. This weird little unit we've accidentally created." Looking at this man who'd sacrificed everything for principles he couldn't compromise, Janelle felt her heart make a decision her mind had been dancing around for weeks. "Yeah," she said simply. "I'll have us." The engagement ring came from a pawn shop on Eastern Avenue. Nothing like the 15-carat monstrosity Madison had demanded. It was simple, elegant, and cost less than most people spend on groceries. Exactly what Janelle would have chosen if anyone had asked her. but nobody had asked her, because Brandon Royce, CEO turned activist, tech mogul turned truth-teller, was planning to propose to a hotel MAID from Maryland, and he was terrified she'd say no. "You're overthinking this," Marcus announced from the back seat as they drove to Janelle's favorite restaurant, the same hole-in-the-wall Italian place where they'd had their first real date. "I'm not overthinking anything," Brandon replied, checking the ring box in his jacket pocket for the 20th time. "You are. You're doing that thing where you worry too much. Mama says you do that when you care about something. Your mama's pretty smart. She's the smartest. That's why she'll say yes." The confidence of 8-year-olds was simultaneously comforting and terrifying. Marcus had figured out what was happening the moment Brandon asked if he could talk to your mom about something important, and had immediately started planning what he wanted to call Brandon after they got married. "Can I be your best man?" Marcus had asked seriously. "Wouldn't want anyone else," Brandon had replied, and meant it. Now, sitting across from Janelle at the same corner table where they'd first talked about dreams and failures, Brandon tried to remember the speech he practiced. Something about love and partnership and building a life together. Instead, what came out was, "I need to ask you something, and I'm probably going to mess this up. Have you ever watched someone you love try to find the perfect words for the most important question of their life? Share in the comments about the most memorable proposal you've witnessed or been part of." Janelle looked up from her pasta, noting the nervous energy radiating from the man who'd faced down hostile reporters and federal investigators with more composure than he was showing right now. "Okay," she said simply. "I know this is crazy. 6 months ago, I was engaged to someone else. My life was completely different. I thought I knew what I wanted." The words tumbled out faster than he intended. "But then I met you, and everything changed. Not just the scandal or the company stuff. I changed. Brandon, let me finish before I lose my nerve." He reached across the table, taking her hands. "You made me want to be better. Not richer or more successful, but actually better. A person who deserves the kind of love you've shown me." Janelle's throat tightened as she realized where this was heading. "I know I'm not the safe choice. My company's rebuilding, my reputation's shot. I have no idea what the future looks like financially." He pulled out the ring box, setting it on the table between them. "But I know I want to figure it out with you. You and Marcus. As a family." The restaurant seemed to go quiet around them, though Janelle suspected that was just her heart pounding so loud she couldn't hear anything else. "Janelle Washington," Brandon said, opening the box to reveal a modest diamond that caught the light like captured starfire. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you?" She stared at the ring, at this man who'd given up everything for his principles, at the future spreading out before them like an unwritten story. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Is that a yes?" "That's a let me see how it looks on my hand before I give you an answer." Brandon's laugh was shaky with relief as he slipped a ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. "Now it's a yes," she said, and kissed him over the breadbasket while the entire restaurant burst into applause. Marcus, who'd been watching from a nearby table where the hostess had been keeping him entertained, ran over to hug them both. "Does this mean Brandon's going to be my dad?" he asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If that's okay with you," Brandon said, kneeling to Marcus's eye level. "It's okay with me, but you have to promise to help with my math homework and teach me how to drive your car and come to my school place." "Deal," Brandon said solemnly, shaking Marcus's hand like they were signing a business contract. As they walked out of the restaurant together, Marcus between them, swinging their joined hands, Janelle caught their reflection in the window. A family, unexpected, unconventional, built from second chances and fierce choices, but undeniably real. "So," she said as they reached the car, "when you want to do this thing?" "Tomorrow," Brandon suggested hopefully. "How about we plan something a little more special than City Hall on a Tuesday, as long as it doesn't involve 300 guests in a ballroom?" Janelle grinned. "I was thinking more like Marcus's school gymnasium and potluck reception." "Perfect," Brandon said, and meant it. Because sometimes the best weddings aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the ones that make families. The Marcus Washington Elementary School Gymnasium had never hosted a wedding before, but it had never looked more beautiful. White Christmas lights strung between basketball hoops, folding chairs arranged in neat rows, and enough flowers donated by local families to rival any Charleston ballroom. Janelle stood in the school's main office, adjusting her dress. Not a designer gown this time, but a simple white dress she'd found at Nordstrom Rack that made her feel like herself. Through the window, she could see guests filing in. Her neighbors, Brandon's remaining business partners, hotel colleagues who'd become genuine friends, and Marcus's entire third-grade class. "You ready for this?" asked her maid of honor, her sister Carol, who'd driven up from North Carolina and hadn't stopped crying happy tears since she arrived. "I've been ready since the moment I knocked on that hotel room door," Janelle replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. The door opened and Marcus peeked in, looking impossibly grown-up in his little black suit. "Mama, they're playing the music. Time to go." Have you ever had a moment where everything in your life suddenly made perfect sense? When all the hard times led to something beautiful? Share in the comments about your own full-circle moments. The processional was Canon in D, played by the school's music teacher on electric piano, and it was the most beautiful music Janelle had ever heard. She walked down the makeshift aisle between folding chairs filled with people who'd become family, toward a man who'd chosen love over everything else. Brandon stood at the front of the gymnasium, next to the principal who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this wedding, and he looked like he was about to cry. Behind him, his best man. His business partner, James, one of the few people who'd stuck by him through the scandal, was grinning widely. But it was Marcus, standing beside Brandon with the rings in his pocket and pride radiating from every inch of his small frame, who made Janelle's heart overflow. The ceremony was simple, personal, nothing like the elaborate Charleston wedding that had started this whole journey. No society reporters, no political connections, no hidden agendas, just two people promising to choose each other every day for the rest of their lives. "I promise to love you not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard," Janelle said during her vows. "To see your heart, even when the world only sees your mistakes. To build something real with you, something that lasts. I promise to never stop trying to deserve you," Brandon replied, his voice thick with emotion. "To choose truth over convenience, love over profit, family over everything else. To be the man Marcus can look up to and the partner you could depend on." When they kissed, the gymnasium erupted in cheers that could probably be heard 3 blocks away. The reception was held in the school cafeteria, with a potluck dinner that somehow tasted better than any catered meal. Brandon's wedding cake came from the grocery store bakery. Marcus gave a speech that made everyone laugh, and they danced to songs played through someone's Bluetooth speaker. It was perfect. As the evening wound down, Janelle found herself on the school playground with Brandon, watching Marcus play with his classmates under the stars. "Any regrets?" she asked, the same question she'd posed that night in Charleston. "Only one," Brandon said seriously. Her heart skipped. "What's that?" "I regret that it took so long to find you. All those years I spent thinking success meant money and status, when it actually meant this: family, purpose, love that isn't conditional on performance." "Well," she said, settling into his arms, "good thing we found each other when we did, before it was too late to build something real." "Speaking of building something real," Brandon said, pulling back to look at her, "I have a wedding present for you." "Brandon, we agreed no expensive gifts." "It's not expensive. It's practical." He handed her a set of keys. "They're for the community health clinic." "What community health clinic?" "The one we're opening in Prince George's County. Full staff, sliding scale payments, focus on pediatric care." His smile was soft, proud. "I figured if my wife is going to be a nurse, she should have somewhere amazing to work." Janelle stared at the keys, then at her husband, then at Marcus running around the playground with his friends. 6 months ago, she'd been a hotel maid with dreams she barely dared voice. Now she was married to a man who didn't just support those dreams. He helped build the foundation for them. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. All of you. This whole beautiful, chaotic, perfect life we're building." As they walked back toward the school, Marcus ran up to take their hands. "Can we do this every year?" he asked. have a party, and invite everyone and eat cake. That's called an anniversary, buddy, Brandon explained. And yes, we can do this every year. Good, Marcus said with satisfaction. Because I like our family. So did they. More than either had ever imagined possible. The story that had started with a knock on a hotel room door had become something neither scandal nor judgment could touch. A love built on truth, sustained by choice, and strong enough to weather any storm. And in a world that often felt divided by difference, theirs was a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected connections create the strongest bonds. The wealthy CEO and the hotel MAID had become simply Brandon and Janelle. Husband and wife, partners in life, proof that love doesn't care about boundaries when it finds where it belongs.